Greetings to everybody present in this August meeting. Many congratulations to Dr. Vitul Gupta and the organizing team of Mapicon for being able to organize such a academic feast in these trying times. And many thanks to Dr. Vitul Gupta for giving me an opportunity to present my views because before this August gathering. I am Dr. Sanjeev Singh Sodhi, cardiologist, and I've done my DM from SIAM Mumbai, and I'm practicing in Mohali as a senior consultant cardiologist and interventionist. I'd like to start my topic for the day. As you all know, one of the common drugs that we use is basically aspirin. Practically, it's one of the most common drugs used worldwide. So today, I just thought we can discuss certain aspects of aspirin in relation to primary and secondary prevention of ASCVD, atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. Well, long back, this drug dates long back in the history. A precursor to aspirin was found in the leaves from the willow tree and was used for its health effects for at least 2,400 years. That's quite an old drug. In 1853, the chemist Charles from France, he treated the medicine sodium salicylate with acetyl chloride to produce acetyl salicylic acid for the first time. ASA, as we all know, is a common name for aspirin, that is acetyl salicylic acid. So what happens is that this acetyl group gives this aspirin the ability to irreversibly acetylate serine in the active site of cyclooxygenase, COX enzyme. So permanently blocking the enzyme action. Now in some cells, this results in temporary analgesic, antipyretic and anti-inflammatory effects until the cell regenerates new COX. But in the platelets, because it does not have a nucleus, the effect is more longer lasting, practically lasting throughout the lifetime of a platelet. And that is because they cannot replace the disabled COX-1 due to absence of nucleus. So therefore, throughout the entire lifespan of that platelet, when aspirin has been taken, the effect of this enzyme will be blocked. As I said earlier, aspirin is acetyl salicylic acid and a medicine used to reduce pain, fever, and inflammation. Even nowadays, with more anti-inflammatories and antipyretics coming, we still use aspirin in certain specific inflammatory conditions like rheumatic fever, Kawasaki disease, pericarditis. These are the specific indications for using aspirin. It has been said that it may decrease the risk of certain types of cancer, particularly colorectal cancer, but that's not the topic of discussion today. Well, as I said earlier, it dates back long time in history. So willow was used in ancient Egypt as medicine. This bark of the willow tree was used in 18th century England for the treatment of malaria. And you will be surprised to know that aspirin played a key role in the 1918 flu pandemic. Anecdotal evidence suggests that it might have played some role in the collapse of the Russian Empire. Anyways, Jeffries described aspirin as, among other things, the most remarkable drug the world has ever seen. I think we all agree with this. One of the astonishing inventions in history and one of the most endurably successful commercial products of all time. It is the subject of around 26,000 scientific papers. So you can see how well studied and well established this drug is. It is a cultural icon that has appeared in the writings of George Orwell, Graham Greene, Edgar Wallace. And so much so that in 1930, the Spanish writer Jose Ortega dubbed his era as the aspirin age. So there are different types of prevention, as you know: primary prevention, secondary prevention, tertiary prevention. The two most important for us for this topic is primary prevention and secondary. Primary prevention refers to the steps taken by an individual to prevent the onset of the disease. This is achieved by maintaining a healthy lifestyle choice such as diet and exercise. Sorry. Secondary prevention focuses on reducing the impact of the disease by early diagnosis prior to any critical and permanent damage. This facilitates avoiding life-threatening situations and long-term impairments from a disease. And tertiary prevention is used once long-term effects set in by helping the patient to manage the pain, increase the life expectancy, improve the quality of life. For example, if some patient has developed CCF post-MI, preventing an MI is one thing, treating an MI is another thing. And long-term, when he develops CCF due to a large MI, in that case, we need to give him drugs which improve his quality of life. So that becomes a tertiary prevention. I'm taking secondary prevention of atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease first because the role of aspirin has been very well established. So I'll just go briefly over the trials because we did not go into details, as we all know that now there's no doubt that aspirin has to be used for secondary prevention. So as I said earlier, a lot of trials have been done and have shown aspirin reduces cardiovascular morbidity and mortality in patients with ACS, acute coronary syndromes, or previous MI and confers long-term benefit. Many randomized controlled trials are summarized by the Anti-Thrombotic Trialists Collaboration, which included 16 secondary prevention randomized trials, 17,000 individuals at high risk, 43,000 person years, 3,306 serious vascular events, and compared long-term aspirin versus control. So quite a huge number, good number of trials and a huge number of patients and a long follow-up. Now this was the trial which initially, showed the impact of aspirin post-MI. So this is where it all started. The ISIS-2 trial, that is the International Study of Infarct Survival 2 trial. 17,187 patients, acute MI. Streptokinase was given over 1 hour, aspirin for 1 month, or placebo in place of aspirin. Aspirin significantly reduced the risk of serious cardiovascular events, including death. These benefits of aspirin were evident in just a few days, with a little risk of bleeding in this short time. Post-stenting, I'm sure everybody now anyway agrees and knows that the aspirin clearly reduces the risk of events over and above any bleeding downsides, at least in the short term. So aspirin remains the mainstay of therapy for secondary prevention of CV events. So as I said earlier, the role is very well established. The trial was ISIS-2, which established the role beyond doubt, and many more trials came up later on to give further evidence. Just naming the few trials, in case somebody wants to go into details and see the data and all. These are the trials for prior MI, for acute MI, aspirin versus placebo. Again, these are the trials for unstable angina, a post-coronary angioplasty, and even for patients with stable CAD. All these trials have shown results of aspirin being far superior to that of a placebo or the drug. In fact, the few drugs that are supposed to be conferring a benefit on mortality post-NMI would be aspirin, would be statins, and would be ACE inhibitors or ARBs. So they are the ones which are, have been shown to clearly provide mortality benefits. Others would help the quality of life and may prevent some complications. So in acute coronary syndrome, everybody knows this is just to recapitulate that the patient should receive non-enteric coated chewable aspirin in a dose of at least 162 to 325 milligrams. I prefer 325 milligrams unless there's a clear history of aspirin allergy. Pure only aspirin intolerance, in the form of APD, etc., they should still receive aspirin at presentation. And as I said earlier, chewable aspirin is preferred as this promotes rapid absorption into the bloodstream to achieve faster therapeutic levels. Just to mention that the normal available aspirin, commonly available, is enteric coated most of the time, and giving that with water in an acute situation is not helpful. So if that is available, patient should chew it. Otherwise, it will take longer time to start acting. Now, post stenting, post procedure. So, as you know, recommendation is shorter duration DAPT, and for patients at lower ischemic rates and high bleeding risk. Whereas longer duration DAPT, that is dual antiplatelet therapy, may be reasonable for patients at higher ischemic risk with lower bleeding risk. Actually, we have different scoring systems. We have a bleeding scoring system, we have a ischemic score. So we have to first judge as to what was the site where angioplasty was done, the type of the lesion, the number of stents, the type of stent, etc., and decide the ischemic risk. Also look at the patient profile to decide to find out his bleeding risk, and then we balance accordingly. So with new generation of stents, recommendation are same for whether it is a ST elevation or non-ST elevation MI. So the class 1 recommendation is that in most clinical setting, aspirin should be given for at least 6 to 12 months. DAPT basically, part of DAPT. Other antiplatelet agents being clopidogrel, prasugrel, ticagrelor, and may be reasonable for prolonged beyond 6 to 12 month period, depending on the type of the lesion, as I said earlier. So in studies of prolonged DAPT after DES implantation or after MI, the duration of therapy was limited to several years. So, to summarize, for secondary prevention, unless contraindicated, aspirin is to be given to all patients, preferably lifelong. 75 to 100 milligram dose once daily is good enough. I frequently prefer 75, but other available is 150. And in USA, they are using 81 milligrams. PPI can be used when required. And this is just one study which suggested that probably taking aspirin at bedtime might get more protection against heart attacks or strokes. In fact, now theories have come up that even for blood pressure, if you have to give only one drug, one dose a day, then it is better to give it in the night time. But anyway, more studies would be required for this. So we all know when to avoid aspirin. We need to avoid it when there is a history of GI bleeding, peptic ulcer disease, bleeding from other sites, age more than 70 years, unless specifically indicated. Thrombocytopenia, of course, coagulopathies, chronic kidney disease, concurrent use of NSAIDs, steroids, anticoagulants. Again, anticoagulants we may need to use along with aspirin when the effects of anticoagulants is not up to the level desired. Now, when we come to the primary prevention, this is a bit controversial nowadays. With three major new studies have come up recently, which have thrown a spanner in the dictum that use aspirin in all the patients. So this was a study which actually gave birth to the idea that aspirin should be given for primary prevention. The Physicians' Health Study meta-analysis showed that aspirin reduced the risk of first CV event by about 12%, though not as dramatic as the 22% reduction seen in secondary prevention. But still 12% was also a good reduction. When only the first few years were counted, the effect of aspirin was closer to that of secondary prevention with an 18% reduction. So maybe the reason was that after a few years the patient stopped taking medicine, or maybe there was increased risk of bleeding events after some time and therefore they stopped. So initial period showed better reduction in the events and later period showed less, but overall the reduction was there. And this prompted the use of aspirin. So as part of the primary prevention, we all know we have A, B, C, D, E. A is aspirin and B is control of blood pressure. C for cholesterol, we control cholesterol by lifestyle management or medicine statins. Cigarette smoking to be avoided. Diet to be taken care of. Diabetes to be taken care of. Regular exercise, 150 minutes per week of moderate exercise, 75 minutes per week of vigorous activity. I prefer moderate, that is 30 minutes of walk every day for at least 5 days a week. So now for decades, low dose aspirin, as I said earlier, has been widely administered for ASCVD prevention. We would also know that a lot of our patients would say that I am more than 50, so I take aspirin once a week. Somebody takes twice a week, somebody takes thrice a week. So over the counter chal raha hai, and aspirin, anybody and everybody is an expert on aspirin. In 2017, it was the 42nd most commonly prescribed medication in the United States, with more than 17 million prescriptions. Overall, they say around 4,000 tons of aspirin have been used annually. Because as you know, it's very, very widely prevalent drug. Now, the problem of primary prevention trials, why we don't have many primary prevention trials, why they're not very reliable. The issue is that event rates for the first event, even in a population considered at moderate risk, are much lower than the rates of secondary events. So to judge as to when somebody will have an event is not easy. Study populations therefore need to be larger and the study duration is much longer. It is less motivating for patients to take a medicine long term when they don't even have any disease. And again, they take aspirin, they get acidity, they are not comfortable, so why should they take it if they have no problem? So again, to conduct a trial is very difficult. Event rate calculated today may be more than the actual event rate when the patient starts lifestyle modifications and control of risk factor. So today, somebody is a smoker, you calculate the risk. After 6 months, he stops smoking. So his risk anyway goes down. So the benefit also goes down. So after the trials, which I'll now enumerate after this, in 2019, ACC and AHA guideline on the primary prevention of cardiovascular disease stated that aspirin might be considered in selected adults aged 40 to 70 who are at higher CV risk, but at no increased bleeding risk. So CV risk is high, bleeding risk is low or none, then you can use it as a primary prevention between 40 to 70. So the three landmark trials are ARRIVE trial, ASCENT trial, ASPIRI trial, which evaluated the role of aspirin in primary prevention of CVD. These are large trials and they're very, very important. So we start with the first one, the ASCENT trial, the study of cardiovascular events and diabetes. Actually, all three came together almost in the same year. And suddenly things changed. As you can see, this is a trial, basically a study of cardiovascular events and diabetes. Randomized controlled trial, more than 15,000 patients, included patients of type 2 diabetes mellitus without any evidence of cardiovascular disease. Aspirin 100 mg versus placebo. And the first serious vascular event was taken as a primary outcome. For example, MI, stroke, or TIA, or death from any vascular cause excluding, of course, intracranial hemorrhage. The mean follow-up was fair enough, 7.4 years. What they found was that serious vascular events occurred in a slightly lower percentage of participants in the aspirin group. That was expected actually, 8.5% versus 9.6%. But they also found that major bleeding events occurred more in the aspirin group, 4.1 versus 3.2% in the placebo group. So the question came up, are benefits outweighing the risks? What it appears here is that if we go on using it indiscriminately, then we are likely to cause more harm than the benefit. So therefore, now the dictum that all diabetics should get, statin with aspirin is out. Statin, I would still recommend that all diabetics should have statins because the recommended levels, generally by and large are never there in diabetes. So we need to anyway give it. But the routine use of aspirin in all diabetics is out unless we have some evidence of cardiovascular disease. Now, this is a little bit confusing because on the one hand, we say that a diabetes mellitus is a, MI equivalent, a myocardial infarction equivalent, CV equivalent. And for that, we always give secondary prevention aspirin is there. On the other hand, now the trial says that even if it is an MI equivalent, we don't need to give aspirin in all diabetics unless we have evidence of cardiovascular disease. This is because now the risks have been more apparent. Now, elderly patient, as I said earlier, after 50, after 60, most of the patients are taking aspirin as per what they feel is a desired dose. So this was a trial for aspirin in reducing events in the elderly. Again, a randomized controlled trial, again, a large number of patients, more than 19,000. Inclusion criteria were more than equal to 70 years without any evidence of CVD. Again, aspirin versus placebo, and mortality comparison was done between the two groups. Follow-up was okay, 4.7 years. Deaths were around 1,052. The risk of death from any cause was actually more in the aspirin group as compared to the placebo group. Cancer was supposed to be the major contributor to the death in aspirin group, although basically it was supposed to reduce colorectal cancer, but there are other types of cancer. In fact, cancer has made this study a bit doubtful as to whether the high risk, because if cancer is the major contributor to the death, then maybe aspirin actually was benefiting them in other manner. But anyway, as per this trial, unless we have more trials, I think we can't clarify this. So as per this trial, we have to understand that aspirin caused more deaths. So higher all-cause mortality was observed among apparently healthy older adults who received daily aspirin than amongst those who received placebo. So with this, we should encourage the patients to stop taking aspirin unless they have an evidence of coronary artery disease or cardiovascular disease. Just taking aspirin because they're more than 50 is no longer recommended, is no longer safe. Now the third trial, that is the ARRIVE trial, aspirin to reduce the risk of initial vascular events. Now this was taken up in men more than equal to 55 years of age and women more than equal to 60 years of age. It was a double-blind trial, RCT, more than 12,000 patients enrolled, and again the outcome was cardiovascular death, infarction, angina, stroke, or TIA. Moderate risk of CV disease means what? Moderate risk of CV disease means what was taken here in this was 3 or more risk factors, which are out of the 4 ones, well-known ones, that is the current smoker, dyslipidemia, hypertension, and family history of CV disease. Individuals with diabetes were excluded. So mean follow-up was also good, not bad, 60 months. Primary endpoint occurred in 4.2 patients with aspirin and 4.4% patients in placebo group. That was expected. The aspirin group would have a slightly less mortality. GI bleeding events were more in aspirin group, almost double as compared to the 4.46% in the placebo group. So again here, this was the basis for the AHA and ACC recommending that you do not give it to all above 40 unless they have a moderate risk of coronary artery disease in the near future. Now, these are further trials which are supporting the 3 major trials that I have told. ARRIVE, ASCEND, and ASPIRE. They are the main 3 trials which have modified our view regarding aspirin in the primary prevention. So this is another trial which is basically it's a meta-analysis of 11 trials with 1,57,000 patients, and none of them had established coronary atherosclerotic cardiac disease. And the all-cause mortality was seen. Follow-up was 6.6 years. they did not show any advantage of taking aspirin. It was, in fact, associated with increased incidence of major bleeding and increased incidence of intracranial hemorrhage. So this meta-analysis, I think, made, put the final nail in the coffin of aspirin as a routine primary prevention drug. This is just supporting the ASCENT trial, the diabetes trial from Japan. Fair number of patients, smaller compared to the other trials. And again, they showed clearly that after a follow-up of 10 years, that low dose aspirin did not reduce cardiovascular events in per protocol cohort. Incidence of hemorrhage, they have said, was not equal, but then patient number is very less, only 2,000. And this is regarding the stroke. And GI bleeding was more in aspirin, of course. So according to this trial, low dose aspirin did not affect the risk of cardiovascular events, but increased the risk of GI bleeding in patients with type 2 diabetes in primary prevention setting. So here I would like to just mention one more point, digressing on the topic. The patients of aspirin, if they have anemia, always better to do a stool local blood because they may not be bleeding clearly, obviously, but they may have stool local blood positive. Because GI bleed need not always be, very obvious or very high and in amount, and patient may not have noticed also. We need to be a little careful about GI bleeds when we give aspirin over a long period of time. And of course, in elderly patients, hemorrhage can be an issue. So now, what do we do? Does it mean that aspirin is gone forever as far as the primary prevention is concerned? Secondary, we have no issues. Secondary, we have no doubts. But what about the primary prevention? Is it over now? Is the role finished? Because did the trial overestimate the CV risk? We have shown benefit with the aspirin. So did the trials actually overestimate the risk, and that's why the benefits were shown? Well, they have found that the expected event rate was actually higher compared to the observed event rate, even when the patients were being given placebo. So therefore, what has been recommended is that you go for a personalized approach. Because what happens is, so these are the fallacies when you start estimating the risk. Risk calculators are good, but then they also have their own problems. One is that the ability to accurately estimate the risk of future events. It is now found out that the risk calculators may just give you a general idea. They are not that accurate, and you may need to recalculate the risk at 6 months or 1 year or 2 years gap. The CV disease risk calculators tend to overestimate risk in population where CV risk is falling. Overestimation factor is more in females. In fact, many risk charts are based on studies with male preponderance. Many of the charts are very, very old. And that time the concept was basically that females are less likely to develop cardiac disease. And therefore, the population considered while making these charts had a male preponderance. So therefore, it is said that the risk factor becomes overestimated in females. Then, as I said earlier, the CV risk is not static because when the patient stops smoking or go for the control of lipids, blood pressure, and adopt healthier lifestyle, the risk is lowered. So if today we estimate somebody has a 20% risk and put him on aspirin for that, if the person is serious and tomorrow he was smoking and he stops smoking, he reduces alcohol, he takes statins to reduce his cholesterol levels and exercises regularly, after maybe 6 months to 1 year, you will find that his risk is not what we calculated 6 months back. So now with a lower risk, is it worthwhile giving him aspirin and leading to a hemorrhage or a GI bleed? So that has to be seen. So, and now the trend is more for a personalized approach in every patient. For example, other guidelines such as those for lipid and blood pressure management also advocate the use of risk estimation in tailoring the therapy. So, what is the level when you start treating blood pressure as per the new guidelines? Again, this includes the risk factor. Then the guidelines for lipid lowering agents, mild, moderate, what level we need to start with. Again, depends on the risk assessment. So, and maybe over a period of time, new genetic and artificial intelligence derived risk estimators, they will refine our ability to assess risk. My suggestion is that till we have excellent risk factor estimation charts, it is better to reassess the patient every 6 months to 1 year. So you can start some therapy as per the risk, but later on, after 1 year, be sure that the risk is same or it has decreased, and then you can accordingly modify the management. But then the new data do not exclude the possibility that aspirin may still benefit adults at a very high CVD risk. For example, 20% or more over 10 years. So here, even if you have overestimated and the risk is 10% actually, still it will benefit. So therefore, when somebody has a high CVD risk, that is 20% or more over 10 years, it is better to give aspirin. Those at lower risk who are unable to tolerate statins can be given aspirin because, as I said earlier, the three important drugs are ARBs oblique ACE inhibitors, aspirin, and statins, which are conferring mortality benefits. So if you can't give statin, at least give aspirin, and be careful about the bleeding issues. The risk of low dose aspirin therapy for primary prevention otherwise outweigh any potential benefits. So unless the risk is high or at least moderate, we should not give it. For most patients, we should be de-prescribing aspirin for primary prevention. As I said earlier, to prevent heart attacks and strokes, family physicians should focus instead on smoking cessation, lifestyle changes, controlling high BP, and prescribing statins where indicated. Actually, after the arrival of statins, which have changed the risk of events in cardiac patients, they have drastically changed it. So therefore, after their arrival, we in fact have to think that all those trials done before arrival of statins, how relevant are they for long-term prescriptions after statins have arrived? So recommendations based on meta-analysis and the three recent trials. So till we have more evidence, these are the latest recommendations. That low-dose aspirin, I generally nowadays, after these trials, I have preferred 75 milligram, and generally I don't go for 150 milligram. So low-dose aspirin might be considered for primary prevention of ASCVD in select higher risk adults between 40 to 70 years who are not at increased bleeding risk. Low-dose aspirin should not be administered on a routine basis for primary prevention amongst adults more than 70 years because we know hemorrhage is more likely. Low-dose aspirin should not be administered for primary prevention among adults at any age who are at an increased bleeding risk. What are the special situations, as I said earlier, in places of the world where the risk is rising? So again, basically higher future risk, or where other preventive strategies, such as statins, are less available. Aspirin is a low-cost intervention, and this may play an important preventive role. Aspirin still plays an important role in prevention of ASCVD. There's no doubt about that. It remains an important medication in the acute treatment of vascular events, after certain procedures, in secondary prevention, and in primary prevention in the right patients. So aspirin is still there to stay. It will not go. And after the three trials, we have to now be more careful when we are using aspirin. But again, we should emphasize on therapeutic lifestyle changes for primary prevention. That would go a long way in treating the patients, and that does not have any side effects. Thank you. Thank you very much for your kind attention.